Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Thank you for that introduction, Sean. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tales of the Sale, episode 38. We are getting back on our monthly recording schedule. It is September. It is, however, the middle of the month as opposed to the beginning when we would typically aim for, because I'm a teacher and school is starting. But thankfully, I'm joined by two people who are not teachers and have far more sensible jobs. I am joined by new regular, Garrett Swader.
Hello.
And Glenn, the gentleman farmer, Van Meter.
Hey, I do want to say, as parents, we might qualify as teachers in, a different way.
Teaching life.
You're never too old to stop learning. So I look forward to learning from both of you as fathers, sagely men of wisdom.
We can teach you chemistry stuff.
That'd be cool.
True.
We're both chemists.
I took AP chemistry in high school, and I managed a 3 on the test after trying really, really hard. And the chemistry teacher called my house, and he told my parents, "Your son is the worst chemistry student that I've ever taught in my career." So I can't tell you how impressed I am that he actually managed to pass that exam, which was an impressively backhanded compliment, but I took it,
Although you may want to scrub that from the record before someone in your school district hears about this and has you teaching chemistry next year.
I'll teach chemistry, Glenn. I know the beautiful part about science is that it's not a general degree. So it's one of the only disciplines in a high school, at least in New York. I can't speak for some of the other states that have a less honorable track record, but you have to have majored in the discipline you are teaching. So if you're majored in chemistry, you can teach chemistry. And in New York State, you're allowed to teach one course outside of your specialization area. So you could teach like 3 sections of chemistry, but you could teach like 1 section of physics if you have some coursework in it.
Oh, see, I was going off of them shoving you into economics, but I guess anybody can screw that up.
Economics is a social science, and I am nothing if not a social scientist, Glenn. I'm sorry. That was atrocious. Please let it be stricken from the record.
No, I'm just going to start weeping for the future if they consider economics to be a social science.
We were at a faculty meeting today, and 2 of the science teachers who I'm friends with turned to me and they're like, "Do you consider yourself a scientist because you teach social studies? Is that a science?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Thank God we can still be friends because we could not accept you otherwise." And I'm like, "That's fair. I'd hate me too."
But don't worry, the sociologists will start trying to edge in on it.
Don't start that. Don't go down that
We're
road.
about to get downvoted.
Don't go down that road. All right. We are going to go around the horn. The plan today is to kind of talk about what we've been up to. Garrett and I have been particularly busy since we last recorded. Glenn has in the show notes listed that he's been up to stuff, period. I don't know what that means, but knowing Glenn, it could be interesting. It could be horrifying. It could be funny. It could mean that he got attacked by farm animals, because you lead a really colorful life, Glenn.
It's true. And with a farm, it really could be anything. I could be fixing something. I could be,
building that chicken house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could put up the second wall of the chicken house after. I think I've got to wait 3 or 4 years in between walls going up.
You got to you got to do it while I'm there, right?
Yeah, I don't want to get my wife's hopes up and her think the project's actually going to get finished.
Well, we can speak in whatever terms we want about the project because we know for a fact that she doesn't listen to this. So
Correct.
We can talk chicken coop. We can talk goats. We can talk electrified fence. Glenn, you could use this podcast as a confessional for all the home improvement projects
Actually,
that you and I have no intention of completing.
I did spend several days trying to fix the stupid electric fence, but that's neither here nor there. No, I actually got to paint some things, like hobby related. I've been trying to build some models, and I actually got a few models base coated. I didn't get to do the detail work because the night I had set aside to do that, I ended up getting familied.
So what models have you been working on? We'll start with kind of you and let us know what you've been up to.
Oh, good Lord. I didn't want you to pin me down on that.
Consider yourself pinned.
Yeah, so the models I painted were actually a flight of P-39 Aerocobras for Red Skies because my club decided to go in on the Warlord Summer campaign, which was fully supported up until my club went to figure out what the weekly mission was, and apparently it just ended. So
campaign's over.
As supported as ever.
Go home, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's seen a real renaissance of Warlord games in my club. So I was like, well, if I'm gonna show up 1 week or 2, I might as well grab something simple. And I figured I could paint 6 planes real fast.
Nice.
Beyond that, I've been building Legion minis, trying to get more of the pirates put together because they are a multi-part adventure, to say the least.
I still haven't started messing around with them, but I'm slowly getting organized and starting to work on projects because I have been busy. So I'm mostly focusing on terrain because I have all these buildings that I'm putting together and they're all glued and sealed. So now I have to start painting them.
Yeah, I do need to work on terrain because I'm doing Fall In pretty much by myself. And while I have enough for the tables, I'd prefer to have more so that the tables are not thin. I think we did a good job at Historicon, but I would just like to personally have a bit more stuff ready to go.
I think we did a great job at Historicon. I will say that you were considering just running a C tournament at Fall In for that reason, that you were worried you wouldn't have enough terrain. What is the current plan for Fallen?
Because I believe it's a 150 point land tournament. Saturday 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. land tournament, 150 points. We have a max of 16 players, which historically speaking, we might actually cap that out. Most of our tournaments have been I think 14 is the smallest land tournament we've done at an HMGS event. So
yeah, you're right.
We might actually fill it up for once. Because we don't normally cap it, or we cap it at something crazy like 32, and then I think this time we had 22 or 24 people show up. I forget what we said in the last episode. But Fall In's a smaller convention by a little bit. That said, we have a fairly dedicated community. So anyway, 3 90-minute rounds, and it's going to go from 9 a.m. till I think 2 p.m. So hopefully it won't waste your entire day. You can get an afternoon game in somewhere, a late lunch, early dinner, whatever you want to do. And I think that puts you out in time to go to the second Wally's basement.
Nice. I think one of the lessons that we took away from Historicon, which we kind of mentioned in some of the conversations we had last episode, is that I don't want to cram that much into a day again. And I want to be able to have enough time in between rounds to pace things properly. I think we're going to keep refining the way we manage it or run it. I don't know that I'm going to be able to be there to help out because I think I'm definitely going to Adepticon. And if that's the case, then I need to kind of save up a bit of money for that. And I can't, splash out on a hotel. I don't
remember if we mentioned last time, Cold Wars has already been announced as canceled for next year. So if you are going to Adepticon, there's that. I'll be at Cold Barrage once we figure that out, but that's the same weekend as Adepticon.
So we'll divide and conquer, I guess. But I'm grateful that I think a lot of the guys I know Jason Klotz is going to be at Adepticon. I know Joe Forrest is going to be there. You're going to be there. So like,
yeah, I might
I'll be
just
able to
run
assist, but I'm
game.
largely there to play for a change.
Yeah, I might just run a large game at Cold Barrage so that any locals who are too poor to travel to Adepticon can get some Blood and Plunder in. But I doubt we'll have enough folks for a tournament.
If you get a big game in, that's something, because those are fun.
Yeah,
they usually draw a lot of eyes. It's fun to watch. If they're run well, and you've got players that kind of know what they're doing, they do tend to move. But I would say, yeah, big games have the same kind of management stuff that usually creates obstacles for people, regardless of the game system. Like, you really need to have a system in place to kind of keep it moving. Otherwise, it can get bogged down, and people don't pre-plan turns, stuff like that. But I mean, you've done this enough to know the drill.
Yeah, because we've done big
Garrett
games
as well.
after tournaments and other things like that. So
Tyler's great at it. Miguel's pretty good at it. Yeah, I've almost never gotten to. Well, I have never played in one of those big games, because usually I'm so shot by the time they come around that, like, I don't want to deal with it. And I'll wind up having to, like, teach new players, and I've already done that all day. So I'm like, But I actually got to play one this past weekend, Labor Day weekend, and it was fun. I'm glad I got to actually try it out. I have Nigel to thank for that. But
well, why don't we
maybe
just
I get to do it.
You're up to.
Sounds like segue.
It does, yeah. So I was looking for a way to get in a bunch of games and have a last hurrah before I went back to school, because in New York, for the uninitiated, we start school basically later than anybody else in the country, with a couple of exceptions, but they start the same time that we do. We start the day after Labor Day. Usually this time it was, so I started on my first day of classes was last Tuesday, September 5th, because as we record this, it is September 12th. I had to report for training Wednesday and Thursday the previous week. So they gave us like a 4-day weekend, and then we go in and face students for the first time. So I had people over on Saturday of that weekend, and I invited anybody who wanted to come. From an original guest list of 6, we went down to 4. And with those 4 people, we played a team battle on land with me and my friend Mark fighting it out against Eric Goebel and Miguel Vega, who are both phenomenal players. And Mark is a new player who's only played the game once prior to that Saturday. Eric made a list for Mark, and Miguel made a list for me. And if you recall on the podcast last month, Miguel said, if Tom can't win with that list, then maybe he is really as bad as he says he is. Well,
how'd that go? I was curious.
Tom got annihilated. Tom was out by the second turn because Miguel is brilliant at building lists that he plays phenomenally aggressively, that have a multitude of overlapping special rules. We will talk about some of the underpinning for those awesome rules that he knows so well and takes such excellent advantage of, with a new little segment we're going to do at the end. But his native force would run up, jump around. It had like a threat range of 14 inches. It jumped into the fray, went around corners, so I couldn't get defensive fire, attack people while they were loading. In one turn, I think he slaughtered maybe 15 of my models.
Nice.
So, and he's not being, cheap or kitschy. He built a good list. I was out in the open too much. I was trying to screen Mark's stuff. We did not build lists that synergize with each other particularly well. Eric Goebel also knew that he had 200 points and knew that he would be paired up with another player. And so what Eric Goebel decided to do, and he had to bring a bunch of dwarf cannons from what's the not the Warhammer game, but I'm forgetting. There's like a variation of it where you use the same fantasy models, but he had all these dwarf cannons because he needed enough field guns, and he didn't have all the field guns he needed. He brought, I think, 6 field guns with accompanying supporting guys, and they just kept loading and firing.
Kings of War, Age of Sigmar.
Kings of War.
Okay.
So he had like a pirate force. He had a lot of scrubs, and their forces complemented each other really well because Nigel's was a close-up elite melee force, which in the games I've played with him, he loves to play those kind of forces. And the cannons would just rip into buildings, take off my guys' heads. They would kill like one guy a turn, but there's 6 cannons. So each of them would usually hit. The new artillery rules did him a lot of favors. So the land game was kind of over well before it was over. And Mark held his own with a soldier force and managed to do some damage, but we could not hold the field, and we routed by turn 5.
What faction was he playing?
I forget off the top of my head. I'm sure Eric might comment when we post this and let me know precisely what his list was.
Because you said pirates. I didn't think pirates had a core.
How do you get cannons?
Yeah, had a core guy with.
He might have brought like a European army list that he was able to take the stuff with.
I think there's some new factions in Raise the Black that have core guys that have artillery.
It was out of one of the new books. It was out of either Raise the Black or Fire on the Frontier. I think
you just said pirates, and I was like, what pirate faction has field artillery as core?
We were proxying a lot of stuff. I would say I was for Mark's sake, but Eric and Nigel had tons of models. It took us a long time to set up, which slowed us down. We had some pizza, and then we played a big C game that Nigel had run for Nelson and Company down at Mythicos Games. Because Nelson, the owner, is a great guy, and he wanted to kind of play the C game. Him and Mike Tunez have talked all the time. And so Nigel ran a big treasure ship. So he had like he ran my flute, like decked out like I've never seen it. I think he was like 500 points, something nuts. He had every cannon and swivel gun on that thing. The decks were packed to the gills. And then each of us got ourselves a sloop and had lists that tried to, attack the treasure ship. And Nigel raked Eric's ship. Mark was able to kind of take cover behind Eric while he was being lit on fire and slaughtered. And I kept trying to get into range, and I had done assignments really improperly with the ship cannons and stuff like that. So I was having trouble reloading, and I hadn't assigned people the right way. So I did some damage to the hull, but not enough serious damage. And he was so stacked up that we couldn't quite coordinate a boarding action, because if only one of us boarded at a time, he would have been able to just wipe the floor with us, bit by bit. But if we had managed to get on board at the same time. So we talked for a while after the game was over, and, it was frustrating in parts, but it was still a blast. And Nigel is convinced that it's still a balanced scenario. It's just a matter of us creating slightly better lists and coordinating better. But Mark being new and me kind of relearning the C rules after being a bit rusty meant that we weren't the ideal opponents for his force to give it a good play test. But I think Nigel and I will keep fiddling around with it, because I did learn that he gets to stay up here in the north until at least the new year. Because I know his grand plan is to move down to Florida. And at that point, I'm not going to get to see him very often. Then he becomes Mike Tunez and Rufus Devane's problem. So he gets to have regular games with those guys instead.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So inspired by that Saturday game, Eric Goebel and I created a Facebook group that's just for Connecticut, Hudson Valley, local guys to try to start regularly coordinating to get some regular games together. Because the issue that we have is there are no game stores that carry Blood and Plunder anywhere near us. I think that the closest one is in Brooklyn, and it is not easy getting in and out of New York City. On a good day, I hear they're going to put in congestion pricing soon. I don't know if that passed, but that'd be exciting. So Miguel's getting out of New York City at the right time because it's getting crowded and it's difficult to get in at all. But the plan is that we're going to start having a big game at a different person's house every 2 months, which is an achievable goal. It lets us kind of set up little mini tournaments. I have about 8 to 10 people on it. I'll kind of mention that anybody who's listening to this that is in the Connecticut area, like Western Connecticut, Massachusetts, Lower New York, basically below Albany, you're probably within an hour and you're welcome to come. So, message me on Discord, or you can bug us on the Facebook page and I will make a point of adding you to the private group. School started. That's the ball of fun. I'm running a bunch of games for kids at the Danbury Library in October, and the Putnam County Historical Society has asked for my help to build them a diorama of the Tilly Foster Mine, which is a historic mine that used to exist on the current property of this Tilly Foster farm and table restaurant area. They basically restored this old historical part of Putnam County in the town of Southeast where I teach. And the woman who's in charge of the Historical Society is actually like a friend of mine who I taught her daughter, I taught her son, and she looked at some of the pictures of the stuff that I've made in terms of terrain, seemed fascinated, and ran the idea by the board, and they agreed to pay me to build this thing, which is pretty cool. This is also a woman who, because I told you I've been very busy this month. The other weird thing I got to do, and I don't think I mentioned this in the last podcast, was the same woman who's in charge of the Putnam Historical Society, Jen Cassidy, called me up like 2 weeks ago and said, "Hey, do you want to go see them open a time capsule at West Point?" And I said, yeah. I mean, like, how old is it? And apparently they found a time capsule inside of the statue for Kosciuszko, the famous, engineer, war hero from the American Revolution. Washington loved him. He was at Yorktown and stuff like that. And they discovered a sealed lead box that had been put inside of the monument that nobody knew about. And there was no record of it ever being put there. It was put there when the monument was dedicated at West Point in 1822. And they put a statue on top of it a couple of years later because statues are cool and they weren't really thinking about it. But over the course of 194 years, the weight of the statue cracked and destabilized the base. And because an engineer saw it while he was visiting, he was like a retiree who was walking around this relatively isolated part of the campus, they called in the engineering teams, they found this crack, and they realized that there was a piece of metal in there when they had to kind of rebuild or restructure the thing. So there's this big unveiling, and it was a weird thing to be at because you had news cameras there were cadets there. I had a bunch of students that I've taught. One of them, two kids that I know and taught go to West Point. One of them is a junior, and she's currently in Spain doing something with NATO, but I haven't talked to her in a while. The other guy is brand new. He just got his appointment from Putnam County in New York, and he came out to see me, and we watched the big unveiling together with Mrs. Cassidy. And they opened it up after they had historians there giving commentary like it was a football game. It was one of the weirdest events that I've ever been to. It was absolutely fascinating. And when they finally opened up this time capsule, to all this fanfare, with all these cameras staring at it, it was like that scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where it's just sand.
Minus everybody's face melting.
I was waiting for that to happen, and so was everybody else.
Yeah.
But
Just don't look at it.
Just don't look at it, Marion.
Yeah.
So they found like bumps and stuff on the bottom. I learned about a week afterwards that once they had sifted through it and run it through a centrifuge, they actually found a ton of like antique metal coins that had been like they might have been cast to commemorate the event of like dedicating the statue and monument. And interestingly, they have a record of the speech that they gave when they dedicated it, but they don't have a record of ever burying this time capsule. And I think other stuff was in it, possibly like textiles and wood, or like something cotton or ribbons. But there's a crack on the bottom of the lead soldiered case because they soldered it shut, and the weight of the collapsing monument and the water that got into it must have corroded and destroyed it, which is a shame. But they did find the coins, so that's a win. And the last thing that I'll mention is that despite a nearly 1 month delay, I have succeeded, as of yesterday, of mailing out Tales of the Sales Summer of Plunder prize to Daniel Perkins of Massachusetts. Daniel, it is on its way, and it should arrive at your house tomorrow. It'll be the weirdest package that your wife opens, if she in fact gets to it first, because it is full of a bunch of custom-made terrain hills that I built for you, because Tales of the Sale gave out a prize to the battle report that was submitted that had the worst terrain. So in the interest of having you not have bad terrain...
Whoa. Terrain
I gave out
in need of improvement.
That's fair. We'll be more charitable, but it was a book. So, hey, I've played on a book before. Books are great, but I think my hills are cooler than the books you were using. So enjoy them. I hope you have a good time with them. I gave you 4 big hills. So you have more than enough to cover a board, possibly 2. So enjoy them.
Nice.
And now, Garrett, you've also been super busy. So tell us all the stuff that you have been up to in your neck of the woods.
I am going to be trying to playtest a campaign coming up that Joseph of Blood and Pigment fame is writing right now. He's written most of it, but it's a possible Firelock release later. But yeah, we're gonna try to do that at the game store that I'm currently playing Blood and Plunder at. I'm doing some terrain work for that. I've got a San Marcos fort that is put together, and I'm currently working on painting. It's been weird trying to get the color right on it. I'm trying to get it a certain type of like off-white to match the type of stone they have down in St. Augustine. I've also got a governor's mansion that I'm trying to build right now that's 3D printed. So that's something else. I've got ships that I'm working on. I've got a brigantine that's got most of the base color on it. I need to start doing some of the detail work on that one. Galleon's still sitting over across from me. Nothing's done on it yet, but it's there. I have it. It's going to get done eventually.
I find with the ships, once I start it, it gets done quickly.
Yeah.
But it's actually sitting down to start it because I can never bring myself to do it. Well,
and the Galleon's got some extra bits and bobs that you have to put on it too. It's not just to like clean it up and you're ready to go. It's a little bit more of a project. And then I've got natives for this campaign that I'm playtesting. I've got to paint up some natives, so I've got almost ready for shades and highlighting some braves, and then I've got a bunch of my Niases and young braves from the past release back when Fire and the Frontier was new. I'm getting those painted up. Those got neglected for other things, but I need them now.
I have a bunch of those too. I got a bunch of them along with a bunch of the specialized English models because I wanted to build like a blended force for Fire and the Frontier.
Mhm.
And I have all the models ready to go, but I haven't. It's on the list, like many things, right? I feel like my natives, I don't like how the Braves that I painted turned out. And I painted, I think, 4 blisters of them.
Yeah.
But like, I almost want to repaint them because I just painted like the feathers and the facial markings, like however I felt like it. But the different tribes would have been really specific. I don't know how into it I want to get in terms of it can be quite a rabbit hole.
Yeah. How
But
much research do you want to do?
yeah, but like I always look at them and I compare them to the ones that Nigel had painted by Kai and Rufus because they do such an amazing job that it makes me want to be better at the ones that I painted. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna look at Fire in the Frontier for some more inspiration. And once I've made a list that I think I really like, I might structure my painting around the list that I designed. How do you want to paint yours? Like, do you know already? It's just a matter of getting them done, or you're experimenting.
I'm just kind of painting them how I think they look good. I'm trying to keep them very natural colors, not super bright and flashy, unless it's like war paint that's really bright and flashy. My stuff, I'm a nut for Queen Anne's War, just because that's a lot of where I am. A lot of that happened, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, that area. And so the Fire on the Frontier natives kind of fit into that because you had the Creek and the little bit more the southern North American tribes coming down and fighting with the Timucua and the Appalachee in North Florida, which would have probably looked a little bit more like a Caribbean style native. So it kind of blends a little bit with the theater that I'm trying to go for.
Okay.
So I got to kind of do both. But yeah, as far as like war paint goes and everything, it's just I try to do whatever looks cool and whatever looks right, not something crazy, but something that looks right.
I find that I'm not comfortable experimenting until I'm more confident with having copied it a few times, if that makes sense to you. So like I like to have an image to work off of or something to inspire me. Like some of the art from the Fire on the Frontier book is a great example. And
Yeah.
once I've done a few of them, I'm like, okay, now I feel confident enough to play around. But it's almost like cooking for me. Like I love to cook. I used to be a line cook in Maine, and I always follow the recipe until I've done it like a bunch of times. And then once I have, I'm like, okay, I'm going to mess around with it. And now whenever I cook like pasta sauce, or if I make like eggplant parmesan, any Italian stuff really, I don't follow a recipe. I just do whatever because I'm confident enough in how I do it. But painting something that specific, I always feel like I need practice first.
Yeah, I look up reference stuff and all that too. But yeah, I just try to find stuff that looks right to me and looks cool to me. I don't do a whole lot of research into it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Garrett. I just look at some pictures, see what's close, and then go for it. I know my natives don't have any of the war paint stuff because I just didn't feel like bothering with it.
Yeah, I didn't do it on any of the Braves that I did.
They're embarrassing skin tone and like tanned hide colors.
I'm really happy with the skin tones that I achieved, and I really did it just mostly through GW washes. So like they're primed white, and I would do like I would start with an earth shade, and then I would build up like a redder tone, then some yellow. So like I would do like multiple layers of different color washes, and they would kind of blend together to create a really nice tone that creates like a distinct kind of like darker color, and it really differentiates them between like your standard European musketeer models. And I was very happy with the result, but I did a lot of experimenting. So like I would do the wash on a bunch of white tiles and then blend them together. Like I have like a bath tile that's like left over from a project, and I would just try to stain that, and the stain worked great. But there's definitely a couple ones where I'm like, no, that looks terrible, and I would toss it. But it was definitely some trial and error.
My first 12 North American natives were before I got the native tone down while I was doing my Spanish. So my North American natives look like they should be playing for a certain regional football team. It's kind of bad.
Formerly known.
It's not blatant, but they're definitely more of a particular shade than I would want them to be.
I will also say, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here because like I feel like kind of a nerd saying this, but I feel like I'm among friends. I'm talking with you guys, so I keep a notebook. So I will make notes on what shades I used, what colors I used, because I'll forget otherwise. So I have a hobby notebook where I'm like, okay, these are the colors that I used to do this. And I'll draw a little sketch or whatever. And I'm not a particularly good artist. At least I don't think of myself that way. But I'm a semi-decent painter. I'm certainly fast. Something Eric told me, because Eric's like, I think Eric is a much better painter than me, Eric Goebel. But he's like, no, you get a lot of stuff painted. And I'm like, yeah, well, when I actually sit down to do it, which I feel like is most people's problem.
Yeah. Those 6 aircraft I did are some of the first painted minis I've done, I think, all year, which is sad.
And I also, one of the things that I'm trying to get back into is like every 2 weeks or so, my friend Shane and I, my friend Rod, we will usually have like a pizza night where we'll just meet up on a Thursday night, bring some models to paint, and just get going. And I find that motivates me because I get to see people in person, and I get to, I will get models prepped and ready in a way that I wouldn't before. Like I'll sit down and watch TV, and I won't be doing that. But if I have friends to do with, then it's not that bad.
Like you'll prime them more than an hour in ahead of time?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Make sure I'm ready. Hey, if it works, it works. I'll tell you.
For those who weren't around for many of the paint nights we had, it was like the paint night would start with Tom like getting spray paint noises in the background. He's like, "I'm priming my models.
I'm priming the models.
It's technically painting.
The models. Oh, speaking of painting and priming, I just have to share with you the horror that is my house, and then I will jump into our next segment. But we tore down the entire back half of the house, which was this illegal mudroom that they put on. And it was primed, coated, and dripping in chipped lead paint. So I don't know how much of it I breathed in or ate somehow, but if I start to sound increasingly crazy, or if I suddenly drop off the face of the earth, just know that home improvement project is what killed me.
I'm not an expert, but I was under the impression that the main risk to lead poisoning was really brain development. So I think that you might.
So I'm safe
At that level, anyway.
All right, cool, sweet.
Like if you eat it, there's probably some other adverse health effects that.
Well, I didn't intentionally eat any of it, but it's like everywhere.
It just fell in your mouth,
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so there are effects on adults. High blood pressure, brain, kidney, reproductive health issues, headaches, stomach cramps, muscle joint pain, trouble sleeping, fatigue, irritability.
I feel like those are the symptoms of being a teacher in the United States.
There's a couple more that I didn't list that are a little more personal, but yeah, probably.
All right, well, if you start to see me exhibit those, Glenn, just, warn me.
You got it.
And speaking of rules about things we shouldn't do, we are going to talk about a new segment called the Blood and Plunder Rules School. This was a Garrett suggestion, and we thought it was an excellent one, because there are plenty of rules that we see players get goofed up with all the time. And they're pretty straightforward once they're adequately explained or gone over. And so each episode, we are going to make an effort for the foreseeable future to try to zero in on a specific set of rules and try to clarify them for players to create less headaches and to make you guys better at the game. So, Garrett, I will let you take the lead on this one and talk about our rule for the episode. So tell them what we got going on.
So this month, I guess we're doing these monthly. I'm new here. I don't know how this works. Command points. Everything to do with command points. So command points, you typically see them on models like commanders. You will see a command range and a command point. These are spent as additional actions for units that are within the command range. Note that these are not free actions. And you guys are welcome to jump in at any time if you've got something to add on this too. I'm just kind of winging it here.
We're always winging it, Garrett.
Well, yeah. But anyway, yeah, typically you see these on your commander. Once you start getting into more of your in-depth list building, you may run into characters that you can add to your list that also have command points. I think I said that these are a common thing people get wrong with command points. They're not free actions. So the max 3 action limit on your active unit still counts for your command point. You can't use a command point on yourself to give yourself a 4th action for that turn.
Now, remind me of some of the characters that can give you command points. I think we have an officer, right?
The officer's the main one, yeah, that just adds a command point.
Yeah, nearly any fighting man has specific command points they can give out.
Yeah, like Grizzled Veteran, he has a command point that you can only use for a rally. It still counts as a command point, though.
Now, we'll also say, because Garrett said this twice, and it's important for him to emphasize, but command points don't include like free actions. A free action wouldn't count against a unit's activation limit. And free actions are, for example, when you declare a charge, you move into contact with the enemy and you get a free fight action. And even if you had taken 2 actions prior to that move, and that move would be your 3rd action, that fight action is a free action, which means it doesn't count against the limit. Also, other free actions, quick is another perfect example. Go ahead and explain quick.
Yeah, so quick is a free action. You can actually move 3 times if you have used quick. Say you have a veteran unit, they have 2 actions on a spade, they also get quick. You can move 3 times and not take a fatigue for it because the free action doesn't count towards your movement per se in that. I know that's a little weird, but yeah, you can go 12 inches with a veteran quick unit and not take any penalty for it.
Because the free action doesn't count towards the movement range during the activation.
Right. This is how you see cavalry who have a 2nd free action simply for being mounted on horses.
Move so fast.
Horses have quick. They have the horses free move. So there's 2 free movement actions right there. And then especially if they're veterans, although it can be harder to get cavalry veterans. You can see people push them with a fatigue and suddenly they're going 16 inches, charging 20 inches. Like, it'll get you some fatigue on there, but to have horsemen show up from 20 inches away can be a big unexpected change for some units.
Yeah, the movement is their main advantage.
So to summarize and fully clarify, the command points that a commander gets or that a character or fighting man gets there are limitations to it, but they're key to the game and everybody needs to use them. Free actions are not included in this, but every unit has a global limit of 3 actions, and the command point, it could be one of those actions potentially. So let's jump into the parts where people mess it up. So things that they most often miss or problems they don't consider.
Well, I do want to put a caveat in there, which is you can only get the 3 actions during your activation. So when that, and we're probably going to cover this in a minute, but
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can go
Yeah,
into
yeah.
that right now.
so that command point, if it's used outside of the active unit, it does not count against a 3-unit activation. So like, let's say you've got your commander in a veteran unit who activates and they've already got 3 actions, but your commander still has an action. He can order a different unit to go do something else because your current unit's already full on action.
Even if that unit has already taken 3 actions previously in the turn.
Right,
Correct.
in their own activation, provided that they have not already gotten 1 command point, because that's the other thing is you cannot receive more than 1 command point per round.
And I do think that that's one of the ones I most commonly see new players goofing with. Like as soon as they
Yes.
learn that a commander can dish out these extra actions, they get very excited, understandably, because it's cool. And then they're like, "Oh, well, I'm going to make this unit, move and fire." I'm like, no, because the rule is any unit can only ever receive 1 command point per round.
Another thing I see in line with this is, especially again, new people building lists. I look at a list, it's on a sloop. They can only have 4 units, which they've got right. But then
Mhm.
they've somehow fit in like 6 command points.
Yeah, you
Then they've
can't
got
use all of them.
captain with 2 or 3, and then there's a couple fighting characters, and it's just, okay, you're either going to have to expect some fighting characters to die, or you're paying extra for redundancies you're not going to be able to use.
Yeah, that's a huge one that I struggled with when I started playing the game, and I still see people doing is they'll have a officer and then a commander, and they'll normally, if your commander is the only one with command points, you know exactly who's taken command points for that
That's
turn.
easy.
And it's
easy
easy
to keep track of, yeah.
But now it's like, okay, my commander's already went, and now my officer's gone. Who did I give a command point to before? I can give another command point to anybody, right? No, you can't, because that is for the whole turn.
Same thing with having a gunnery master, or a master gunner rather, on a ship. Like, you can bet somebody at some point on that ship is reloading in any given turn. So are they taking that from the commander, or are they taking that from the gunnery master?
Right.
Because they can't take both.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So like, let's say that I had my commander in a unit, and then next to that commander's unit is a completely separate unit. The commander activates, he does his thing. He dishes out 1 command point to that neighboring unit to his right. Now, a later activation, that unit activates. It has an officer in it. Can that officer give his own unit one of his command point?
No.
And the answer is no. So, like, basically, this is not an issue if you have a list that's very simple and it doesn't have any fighting men in it, because then only your commander's dishing stuff out. But if you start to have people that can give out command points other than your commander, you have to, keep in mind that you need to track which units have actually been given a command point, because you can't just keep giving them command points from different sources over and over again.
Yep, and this resource management can be this can be one of those things that's the difference between a veteran and a new player. That makes a list 5 times more effective is simply being able to push those commands back and forth and having that great understanding of your synergy of special rules.
And I think that's actually a good transition to the next point on our list about these command points, which is the dedicated actions thing. So Glenn, can you kind of walk us through that?
So I think most players in Blood and Plunder know that you have either dedicated actions or regular actions. Is there another word I'm forgetting for that?
No.
Standard actions.
Standard action.
Actions. There you go.
Standard action. Yeah.
So in your turn, you have standard actions, which you can take in any order. It doesn't matter. But in a turn, you essentially have to go with either dedicated action or standard actions, possibly more than one.
Right.
Dedicated actions have to be the first action you take in a turn, and they use all of the available action points for your unit.
And
this
usually
can be
there's a
tricky.
benefit for that typically. If you're rallying, for example, it lowers the number you would need to pass the rally test.
Right. Any dedicated action which requires a test, which is almost all of them, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Any action beyond the first that your unit would normally have. So, like, let's say you have 2 action points, you take a dedicated action. The second point makes your test easier by 1 point. So, if you normally need a 6 to rally, now you need a 5 to rally. And this can be like a key turn thing, where you're going to take a dedicated action to, like, let's say you really need this unit to rally, and they normally have 3 actions. You take a dedicated rally.
Yeah, they're
Rally's
shaken.
one of those
or
weird
something.
ones that can go either standard or dedicated, so you have to pick.
Yeah, like they're shaken, so they have to rally in this situation.
Or if they're shaken, right? So when you take those 3 actions as a dedicated rally, suddenly you get a +2 bonus. So if you're some godforsaken faction like English, where everybody has a 5 resolve, suddenly you're passing all your resolve tests on a 3. And it can really turn the tide of a game to take one of those dedicated actions in the right way. The weird place where this comes up is if a commander is if a command point is used, it can be used to either add an additional point to a dedicated action. So, like, if your unit only has 2 actions and your commander is in it, he can either use his point to make it a 3 action dedicated action, or the command point can be kind of reserved. You do a dedicated action with 2 points, and then you can use your command point to do a second action afterwards.
Did not know that. I didn't know that.
So, like, in the situation where the unit is shaken, they have to rally first off their card actions. Then, if you've got a command point that you can give them after that, they can do whatever as long as they're not shaken anymore.
Now, something else that always comes up, and I just need to ask this question. I feel like I know the answer, but you guys definitely will know the answer. Let's imagine that I activate the unit that my commander is attached to, right? But that unit is shaken. What are the limitations on the commander? Is he allowed to does he still have his command points?
Yeah.
He has his command points. He cannot spend them outside of the unit. This is where I could be wrong. I think he can use his own command point to rally the unit as the dedicated action.
He can, I believe.
He can also use his command point to
nothing else.
To rally them before they take actions. But if I recall, the catch to this is a lot of people will be like, "Oh, well, now they're rallied, so they don't have the -1 because they're not shaken." And it's like, no.
No, you still have that.
That
-1.
Yeah,
it's assessed at the start of their activation, so they suffer that penalty whether they ditched all their fatigue or not.
But if you need that unit to make a dedicated action like a sailing test, and you're not on something small and lightly built that has a bunch of advantages for sailing with simple rig, for instance, you may want to use your commander's command point to
boost the dedicated action.
Well, no, you'll want to use it to rally first, so you're not.
Oh yeah.
Wasting your dedicated action on that, because in the vice versa of that, if you can use a command point to make a separate dedicated action, so it's possible. And this is some malarkey that will really annoy your opponents. Let's say somebody's run up and they've charged you, and they've got their move. They got their free fight action, which is a dedicated action. You can't fight as a standard action. So they come up, they charge you. You fight back on your turn and have two actions. So you dedicated action, which means you fight test on, like, let's say a 6 dedicated action. So remember, your test gets 1 easier, so it goes down to a 5. But your dice whiff, or you only kill half the unit, but they don't run away because your opponent rolled all their resolve tests, no problem. this is the malarkey you can do: is your commander having his command action can then issue a second dedicated fight action, which means you get to beat up on them again in the same activation, even though
which is
you
which is
just did
clutch.
dedicated action.
Or if you have another unit in that melee scrum, he can tell them to fight as well. What he can't do with the command point while he's in the melee scrum is tell other people outside of the melee scrum to do something.
Unless
That's
he's got
also something that comes up. Yeah.
Elan, I think. Yeah. All of this is hinges on there not being a special rule that says otherwise.
But
right.
that's rare. It's just there's a handful of people that have that.
And I've done that where I had 2 smaller units in a melee and some larger unit got in with them, and I fought, and then I have a commander with 2 command actions, and he orders his own unit and the unit next to them to fight.
The first time somebody did that to me, I had to like flip through my rule book and be like, can he do that?
I thought you were going to say you had to flip the table.
No, no, I was just impressed. I was like, oh, okay, wow, yeah, I guess you can do that.
I'd be impressed too. It's nuts. I mean, that's devastating that he could give out a command. Like if there's 2 units in melee and he's there with them, that's crazy. Now I will say that the 2 other things we want to mention of commonly missed things are about the activation limit, because just because you're giving out a command point, we did mention this earlier, but it bears repeating. If you've already taken 3 actions with that unit, it doesn't get another action with the command point.
That is
and I find that new players do that. They'll be like, okay, I'm gonna shoot, I'm gonna reload twice, and now I'm gonna use a command point to shoot again. It's like, no, you can't, because you already have 3 actions and your unit can't do more than that.
And none of them were free.
None of them were free.
Yeah.
The last rule is one I didn't know either. So Garrett, talk about where you can give these out, or the command range exactly, because I always see people measuring from the commander.
So this is something that I did look through the rule book, and hey, I'm always happy to be called wrong on this, but I did look through the rule book, and I believe since units are kind of like, you can kind of move models around within the unit, as long as everything's cohesive. Most of your commander can kind of be anywhere within that unit, and so you measure. I couldn't find anywhere in the rule book that says that you had to measure from the model of the commander. So what I'm assuming that is you measure from the unit. And so it's just closest model to closest model for the command range. Like I said, now if I may have missed something where somewhere obscure that it does say that you have to measure from the model, everything I could find was you measured from the unit. And that's something that I was like you in the past. I was like, okay, it's got to be from the commander. But as I dug deeper into it, I was like, well, no, it doesn't. And that's kind of how I justified that in my head, is like, models, it doesn't really, we don't ever like distinguish what models are what most of the time in a unit. Like I've got a grizzled veteran in there somewhere.
Right.
But yeah.
I think in closing, I will say,
well, hold on, because I do want to build off of that a little bit. You'll notice going through that many commanders have command ranges in groups of 4. Most ships' sections are 4 inches or less across, which means that they can potentially, like, if you've got somebody in the front of like a brigantine, I believe that the commander with even a 4-inch range can affect the rearmost deck.
That's what I've always played it. Yeah, as it
that's
measures
a really good
across
point to bring up, actually.
the deck.
So and many commanders are like, much like the rest of the game, it's 4-inch integrations or intervals
Intervals. Yeah.
of the command distance, and some of them get absurd. Like some of the guys with Commodore get to like 32 inches, so they can command the entire fleet, no problem.
Yeah.
But you got to be careful with your fighting men, because many of them are only given a 3-inch command range, which means that they can only affect their immediate units in their deck or the deck next to them. And if you're on land, you've got to be very close to each other.
Yeah, it's basically just that unit can take this command point.
Yeah, that's generally. And some of them I think have a 0, which means it is only their unit. But other ones you just have to be very close.
Yeah.
Okay.
So keep an eye on those command ranges when you're doing these things. Again, it's much easier on a ship just because everybody's packed in like sardines usually. But once you get onto land, you've got to pay attention to how far apart your units are, because it's easy to wander away or like have a charge. Your classic fantasy problem where a successful charge will put a unit well outside of where friends can support them.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got the little rule that I found that supports my you measure from the unit. Command points to give. Hold on. Each turn, while a commander's unit is active, the controlling player has the option of spending each one of the commander's command points to give one action to one friendly unit within its command range. Spending a command point does not count as an action. To me, that says you measure from the unit, not the model, because that's all referencing the unit, not the model.
Right.
I'd buy that.
Yeah, I agree. I also say that, like, if people listen to this and you're brilliant rules lawyers, and we've made a goof, then by all means comment or tell us about it. And I will say, to kind of tie a bow on this, one of the big takeaways I take from it is, like, this is covered very concisely in the rule book. It's really only talked about over the course of maybe a page or two, but we've talked about it for 20 minutes because on the surface, it's very straightforward. It's a mechanism by which in the game you get to give out additional actions to different units. That's all it is. However, there are all these little interesting subtleties to it. So, like a lot of aspects of this game, it is simple on the surface, but you dig a little bit and it has all these fun little complexities and interesting, interactions with other rules. So, it's kind of, the hope is that we inspire you to kind of look over pieces of the rulebook you haven't looked at before, or to consider the way that you typically play, because we don't get a chance to play with each other very often, unless you're very lucky. And so when we do, it's nice to get it right.
These rules are written very elegantly. So it's like Tom was saying, just not a lot of text, but tons of
there's nuance and subtlety to the
it's one of the reasons
really,
I love this game.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful set of rules. It's the prettiest rules I've ever read. So with that, we will wrap this up and we will talk about things we've got coming up. I will make a quick plug for people that want to see some spectacular terrain construction, both in process and the finished product. I'd invite you to head over to my friend Shane's YouTube channel. It's called Axis and Aliens. He just finished an enormous, I believe it's 8-foot Blood and Plunder board with a rope bridge and a town and a jungle and a beach. And it even has like an ocean platform. So the plan is for us to play some games on it, but he has a whole video that he posted up last week that talks about the process he went through to make it. And I'd strongly encourage people to go check that out. And I will leave you to talk about what's coming up next, Glenn.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, announcements. Let's start with the tournaments and other events. And as always, if you have anything going on in your neck of the woods, please feel free to send something over to us and we will be happy to mention it. I'm running I'm I'm a Dead Man's Chest with running a 150-point land tournament at Barrage Con September 23rd. So if our schedule holds true, this podcast should come out on the 19th, and then that weekend will be Barrage Con. So if you hear this before Barrage Con, head on over. We've got plenty of room at the moment.
Garrett, you're helping with the Florida one?
For the thing in Pensacola?
Correct.
Yeah.
Or no, you're not.
No,
No.
I am not.
Okay, so the next up is there is a tournament being held by our friends. I think George Helmer, it might be heading it up, but it's the group at Level Up Gaming in Pensacola, Florida. That is September 30th. If you're interested in attending that, reach out to us. We will be happy to give you a link to the Facebook event for more information, or put you in contact with those fine folks. After that, we have, I don't know if I said, that's September 30th at Level Up Gaming, Pensacola, Florida. Following that, I know there's things happening in October. I can't tell you what they are right now, because
We will do our best to get a podcast out in early October, so that if there is stuff going on, we can try to give you a heads up.
Go find the treasure haunt scenario and run it in your local club if you remember.
I've heard a rumor that Blood and Pigment has a thing coming out for Halloween this year as well.
I've heard that rumor
Just
as well.
a rumor.
But yeah, so I've been wanting to run the treasure hunt scenario since COVID hit, and I just have not been able to get that lined up. I've also got a really fun BattleTech Halloween-y scenario, but that's not related to this podcast. HMGS Fall-In is November 2nd through 4th. That Saturday, which I think is the 4th, maybe it's the 3rd.
It's the 3rd.
It's the 3rd. Okay. I'm running the 150-point land tournament there. Again,
no, you're right. It's the 4th. I can't read a calendar. The 4th is the Saturday.
Great. So that's Saturday. We'll be running the land tournament. I went over the details earlier, but feel free to contact us. Come on out. I'll be doing all the normal stuff. Plenty of prizes for everyone, and yeah, I look forward to seeing everybody there. Besides that, if you haven't heard,
in addition to the Blood and Crowns Pantheon, the Blood and Plunder Pantheon of Firelock Games is Blood and Crowns. The Kickstarter is already funded. It funded how quickly?
I think it was like
45 minutes.
45 minutes. So if you want to get in on some medieval combat, check out the game. Check it out on Kickstarter. They are open until 11 a.m. on September 29th. So again, if this comes out the way I plan it to, you'll have a couple of weeks after listening to this to decide to jump in the pool to a project that is already funded. And I will say that these guys have a pretty solid record with Kickstarters. They have funded all of them. They have delivered all of them. So if this is a time period you're into, these guys are really good rule designers. So I would take advantage.
The other major thing is the base. So I think the $25 pledge is just the PDF stuff, and the $100 or $99 pledge is physical copies of everything and PDF stuff. And if I remember hearing correctly, the PDF stuff is like ready to go.
Yes.
Yeah, it's supposedly
Yes, it is.
coming out right after the Kickstarter ends. Yeah.
Yeah, Kickstarter ends, and like 3 weeks later, after payments and things have been resolved, the PDFs will be in your inbox, so you don't even have to wait all that long. Physical product will take a little bit longer to catch up, but
if you already have models for Middle Ages stuff, you're already playing.
And if you don't need cards, because I think cards are one of the weirder PDFs, personally speaking. If you just want the rule book, you don't even have to get the $25 like all the PDFs thing, although I think that's the best value. I think you can put in the $1 and just do $20 to get the PDF rule book, so it's $21 total, or 20 something along those lines.
Cool.
So you can support them for pretty cheap and have another set of rules. I know, Tom, you were looking at several sets of medieval rules. Like personally, I just collect rule books, so I'm. I was like, "Oh, you want to play medieval? Well, I've got 5 sets of rules. What would you like to do?"
Yeah, I don't think my wife has fully forgiven me for backing Raise the Black to the tune of nearly $500. But this is a smaller investment, so maybe I can get away with it. We will see.
They just finished, I think, their Q&A session today, so you could probably check that out too.
Oh, sweet. Yes, they did.
Over on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure they'll have it up.
I'm not sure if there's a Blunder Monkey or a Killer Rabbit, because I saw a little bit back and forth between Neil and Lily.
Well, you got to go there to check it out.
Yeah, go listen to that Q&A because it's supposed to have come up.
It is past 10 o'clock. It's the witching hour.
Oh, we didn't say the date. The Kickstarter ends on the 29th. Get there
I did say.
then.
I said the 29th.
Yeah, I think he saw it. He said it. Yeah.
11 a.m. 29th. Good to go.
Okay. As long as it's emphasized, the 29th. Don't wait that long, though. Go push the button now.
Just go do it.
Push the button.
Garrett, you get to take us out.
Oh. Bye, I guess.
We're going to have to come up with something a little more. we need something nautical theme, but we're going to workshop it, folks.
See
you,
everybody.
Happy sales, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.